How come our government didn't do the same thing for us? Now we're getting into the heart of September the 11th. I picked up this document just a few days after the attacks, September 23rd. And it's from the Herzliya Institute for Counterterrorism. It is an Israeli counterterrorist think tank. Of course it's connected with the Mossad. And what they detailed, this is from the October 15th issue of From the Wilderness. Between September 6th and 7th, the Chicago Board of Options Exchange saw purchases of 4,744 put options on United Airlines and only 396 call options. A put option is basically a bet that the stock price is going to go down. It's a contract that's entered into that's irrevocable. And let's say the gentleman in the suspenders, I do a put option deal with you to sell shares at $100 in 2 weeks, 4 months. 4 months is the standard, but you can write the contract for anything you want. And he's committed now to buy the shares for $100. Well, if I know that the attacks are going to take place, I don't have to deliver the shares until the contract matures. So if I know the stock is going to crash, he enters into a put agreement with me, agrees to buy the shares at $100. The next day the World Trade Center attacks happen. The stocks are selling for $20. I go buy the shares for $20, and he has to buy them for $100. That's how a put option works. That's a short version, okay? So we saw 4,744 put options on United Airlines, but only 396 call options. On September the 10th, 4,516 put options, same deal, were placed on American Airlines, bought on the Chicago Exchange, compared to only 748 calls. There were no other similar trades on any other airlines. And this level of put options was like 600 to 1,200% above normal for United and American Airlines. Now, just these trades alone, there were also put options placed on Merrill Lynch, which had 22 floors. Morgan Stanley had 22 floors, and Merrill Lynch had an offices near. Both were heavily impacted. Heavy put options there, heavy put options on reinsurance companies, Munich Reinsurance, the largest in the world, AXA Reinsurance in France, which owned 25% of American. Totally out of whack. Absolutely spiking. There's another newsletter that says very clearly, by a guy by the name of Phil Erlanger, and this is his newsletter, that the insider trading may have cost $1 billion. Now just these ones that were identified, produced only $2.5 million in instant profits for somebody who knew the attacks were going to take place. Nobody claimed the profits. The San Francisco Chronicle caught it shortly thereafter, and nobody has claimed them since. And we don't know who made the trades. But what did the Herzliya Institute for Counterterrorism tell us? It told us that the United Airlines put options were placed through the firm A.B. Brown. Do you remember A.B. Brown? A.B. Brown was the firm headed until 1998 by A.B. Buzzy Krongard, who is now the executive director of the Central Intelligence Agency. A.B. Brown was sold in 97 to Bankers Trust, then to Deutsche Bank, I think in 98 or 99. It was an offshoot of Deutsche Bank. Now, one thing that I know, that I have written heavily about, is that the CIA, the Mossad, and major intelligence services track all stock trading in real time. On my website, you'll see stories about Promise software, and it's very long to go into, but it's a very sophisticated software. I'm going to write the website for you. It's a very sophisticated software that's been made with artificial intelligence and is capable of integrating wide numbers of databases in different languages. You'll find this on my website at www.copvcia.com. Now, I know that CIA and Mossad track stock trades in real time, so if all these put options were placed on American and United, do you think that should have triggered some alarm inside the Central Intelligence Agency? But instead we find that the trades were placed through a firm that was once owned, managed by the guy who was the number 3 at CIA. These are just pieces of evidence now. I'm building the case. Now, again, we're building up some history here. In January of this year, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda destroyed the entire opium crop in Afghanistan. It's been verified by the United Nations, by the Drug Enforcement Administration, by ABC News, by BBC, who put people on the ground. Afghanistan had been the world's largest producer of opium, producing 70% of the world's heroin through the year 2000. In January, they destroyed their crop. Part of it was a price support. They had overproduced the year before, part of it, and they sold from their stockpiles. But there are no opium crops in Afghanistan right now. They've all been planted, of course, since the Bush administration and the CIA have lifted the ban, and everybody can go back to work and the CIA can move the heroin again.
Something that is not being reported in the US press but is getting quite wide coverage in England and in Europe. And that is that the result of our backing the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan this year is to restore a heroin flow which would otherwise have been halved or more in the world, because the Taliban not only announced that they were going to outlaw planting, but their decree worked. There was no Taliban opium planted last year, and that meant a reduction of 90% in the amount of opium coming out of Afghanistan, and the 10% that was left represented a radical increase in the areas under Northern Alliance control. Now, if we had not gone into Afghanistan, this would have been the most effective reduction in the flow of heroin in the world since the DEA was created 30 years ago. But by going into Afghanistan, backing the Northern Alliance, we've now chased the Taliban out, and in all kinds of provinces where the farmers had started to plant wheat, they're now plowing up their fields and putting in opium instead. And the global drug authorities at the UN expect that we're going to go back to the record flow of opium that we've seen in the last couple of years.
But we heard right after the attacks on September 11th, Tony Blair saying, "We will bomb the poppy fields." Well, there are no poppy fields. They destroyed their crops. I was in Moscow, Russia in March of this year, and I found out that Uzbekistan, and we're going to get to Uzbekistan in a minute, was awash in a sea of poppies. And what did I find also was that companies like Southern Air Transport, Evergreen, and other CIA-connected affiliates had been flying into and out of Tashkent. The CIA had been setting up operations. There were proprietary companies all over the place in Uzbekistan. So now we have the destruction of an opium crop, which does what? It takes cash out of the world's banking system. In conjunction with a stock market bubble, in conjunction with world oil prices or world oil production diminishing, and a huge bubble on Wall Street. Now we come to, this is just from recently, of course. This is from the October 5th. Afghan rebels, that's the Northern Alliance, our good friends. The Northern Alliance, who actually dominate the opium trade from the north of Afghanistan. Okay, now we've seen the recent stories saying that the poppy farmers are absolutely rejoicing because they've gone back to planting. So now we come back to the oil and drugs. There's an old saying, God equals gold, oil, and drugs. Okay? Testimony from February 12, 1998 in Washington, D.C. before the House International Relations Committee by John Maresca, Vice President of International Relations for UNICAL, which had been planning to build a pipeline for some time from the Central Asian oil fields of Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands, across Afghanistan down to the Pakistani coast. It's a distance of about 1,500 miles. To a terminal where U.S. tankers would take the oil and gas and ship it to China and Japan, the largest emerging markets in the world. China's in the middle of a huge oil crisis, and the U.S. Wall Street is pouring money into China hand over fist. And he says in this, construction cannot begin construction until an internationally recognized Afghanistani government is in place. A recent study for the World Bank states that the proposed pipeline for Central Asia across Afghanistan and Pakistan to the Arabian Sea would provide more favorable netbacks, that's money in your pocket, folks, to oil producers. That's his testimony. Now, UNICAL put the pipeline on hold in 1999. They also hired a guy named Henry Kissinger to consult for them, which explains why Afghanistan has never been listed as a sponsoring terrorist nation. Isn't that strange? The head of all the terrorists in the world, and the biggest country, has never been listed? Okay, U.S. companies to invest in Pakistan oil and gas sectors. This is from a Pakistani newspaper, the Frontier Post. The date is, what is the date? October 10th. And what this says, now October the 10th is after we've gone to war, after the attacks on World Trade Center, after we know, is anybody surprised at how quickly we kind of won in Afghanistan? Okay. Well, the war's been planned for 4 years, and I'm saving the best for last. But the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan met with the Pakistani oil minister and briefed the ambassador on the proposed Turkmenistan-Afghanistan Pakistan gas pipeline, and said that this project opens up new avenues of multidimensional regional cooperation, particularly in view of the recent geopolitical developments in the region. Gee, the pipeline that was blocked is now back on full tilt just days after we started the bombing. Suspicious. Okay, maybe I haven't convinced you of everything, but we're just getting warmed up now. This is how Afghanistan went unlisted as a terrorist sponsor. This is the story that I found, and it says right here, UNICAL hired former State Department insiders, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Special U.S. Ambassador John, the guy was also, I didn't see that, the UNICAL guy was also a Special Ambassador, and Robert Oakley, a former U.S. Ambassador to Pakistan. You're going to love where Henry Kissinger turns up on this, by the way. All right. This is one other thing about Kissinger. Chinese oil firm picks Kissinger as advisor. This is from November 4th. Thank you. The Chinese National Offshore Oil Company has hired Henry Kissinger to head its foreign advisory board. Now, Kissinger's got the Pakistan end and he's got the China end of this oil pipeline. Who does Henry Kissinger front for?
Rockefeller.
Very good. David Rockefeller. Who's that? Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was counselor for strategic and international studies, professor of American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins, national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter, trustee and founder of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, international advisor to several major corporations, associate of Henry Kissinger, also worked for Ronald Reagan in intelligence capacities, co-chairman of the Bush National Security Advisory Task Force in 1988. What a guy. Z-Big. Now, if you want to get really angry. Go buy this book. It's called The Grand Chessboard: American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Objectives, written by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997. I'm going to read you some quotes from that book. Page XII, it's the very first words in the book. The last decades of the 20th century has witnessed a tectonic shift in world affairs. For the first time ever, a non-Eurasian power has emerged not only as a key arbiter of Eurasian power relations, but also as the world's paramount power. The defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States, as the sole and indeed the first truly global superpower. Page XII, it's in the preface. But in the meantime, he says, it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger, Eurasia is everything in between roughly east of Germany all the way to the Pacific Ocean, south through the Indian subcontinent, and includes the Middle East. It's imperative that no Eurasian challenger, by that he means Russia or China, emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus of also challenging America. The formulation of a comprehensive and integrated Eurasian geostrategy is therefore the purpose of this book, Geostrategy, Eurasia. The attitude of the American public toward the external projection of American power has been much more ambivalent. The public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It gets worse. For America, the chief geopolitical prize is Eurasia. Now a non-Eurasian power, that's us, is preeminent in Eurasia, and America's global primacy, isn't that arrogant? America's global primacy is directly dependent on how long and how effectively its preponderance on the Eurasian continent is sustained. What he's saying is that if the U.S. wants to stay top dog, we have to control Eurasia. America's withdrawal from the world, or because of the sudden emergence of a successful rival, would produce massive international stability. It would prompt global anarchy. You know what he's saying there? Yeah, a little global anarchy would probably be a damn good thing right now. What he's saying there is, if we don't control the world by whatever means necessary, the world's going to be miserable. He didn't ask my opinion. Did he ask yours? Okay. In that context, how America manages Eurasia, do we manage people around the world? Is that our job? Is critical. Eurasia is the globe's largest continent and is geopolitically axial. A power that dominates Eurasia would control two of the world's three most advanced and economically productive regions. A mere glance at the map also suggests that control over Eurasia would almost automatically entail Africa's subordination, rendering the Western Hemisphere and Oceania, that's Australia for all of you non-academics, geopolitically peripheral to the world's central continent. About 75% of the world's people live in Eurasia, and most of the world's physical wealth is there as well, both in its enterprises and underneath its soil. Eurasia accounts for 60% of the world's GNP and three-fourths of the world's known energy resources. Two basic steps are thus required. First, to identify the geostrategically dynamic Eurasian states that have the power to cause a potentially important shift in the international distribution of power, and to decipher the central external goals of their respective political elites and the likely consequences of their seeking to attain them. Second, to formulate specific U.S. policies to offset, co-opt, and or control the above. The man is talking about co-opting, controlling, managing, subverting nations and peoples and economies. To put it in a terminology that harkens back to the more brutal age of ancient empires, the three grand imperatives of imperial geostrategy are to prevent collusion and maintain security dependence among the vassals, to keep tributaries pliant and protected, and to keep the barbarians from coming together. That's on page 40. I'm telling you, you got to buy the book. Now we get really serious. On page 95, Uzbekistan, with its much more ethnically homogeneous population of approximately 25 million and its leaders emphasizing the country's historic glories, has become increasingly assertive in affirming the region's new post-colonial status. He saw the first step in this as diminishing the ability of Russia to reassert the dream of the Soviet Union. All the stands in Central Asia were once part of the Soviet Union. The borders were drawn arbitrarily by Lenin and Stalin. And he saw one of the most important steps was to prevent Russia from asserting any control in the region, which we did. You know how we did it? Over the last decade, thanks to Goldman Sachs, the Harvard Endowment, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, we looted $300 billion out of the Russian economy. $300 billion. I was there. The Russian population was, 64 million at the fall of the Soviet Union. The population of Russia is today 145 million. In another 10 years, it will be 130 million. The average life expectancy of a male in Russia has dropped to 48 years. Thanks to the economic devastation, the ruin we visited on their economy, it was a deliberate plan to weaken Russia so that it couldn't challenge our move into Eurasia a decade later. It helps if you see this on the map. Okay? Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and China. Now, the proposed oil route is from here to here, 1,500 miles. China can't build it because it's 5,000 miles, and they don't have the technology to build it. We do, thanks to a company named Halliburton, which was chaired with the CEO was Dick Cheney, right? Okay, they're probably going to build the pipeline. Okay, so now that you see this relationship, what he's saying is you build a block starting with Islamic fundamentalism, which we've supported and created, to keep Russia from moving south to reassert control, but then you build up these countries so that they're so powerful, and with a weakened Russia, Russia can't make a move to control, and all the oil reserves are right in here. Okay? And we have effectively made China dependent upon our technology because they need the oil desperately. Now, Uzbekistan, nationally the most vital and the most populous of the Central Asian states, represents the major obstacle to any renewed Russian control over the region. Its dependence is critical to the survival of other Central Asian states and is the least vulnerable to Russian pressures. Where was the first place that President Bush announced we were sending troops after the attacks on September 11th? We were already there. We'd been training Uzbeki troops for more than 5 years.